Hi, this is Mika HÄKKINEN, and come to see the race in Nürburgring.
Yes, indeed, it's the 7th of the 10 rounds of this year's German Touring Car Masters. A very closely fought contest indeed. There's the famous Schloss, which overlooks this circuit with so much history. A big crowd this weekend, over 100,000 expected, and plenty of autographs. It's free to enter the circuit on Friday. All the manufacturers also with some exhibitions. Marcel Fasser there, putting his name down for posterity. Now, this circuit has seen quite a few changes in the last 2 years, but not actually on the track. We actually ride here with Manuel REUTER, and he says just you brake gently under the bridge. Very slippy at this point into the right-hander, down to second gear. Accelerate out of here. Be very careful when it's wet. Up to third gear. And this left-hander is very blind, he says. Important to get on the throttle really early here. Also, this is very slippy. Then taking a lot of curb. Go down to fourth, fifth gear, and then back down the box again. Under the bridge. And through this long left-hander, taking plenty of curb. The next right curve is very important because it leads to the back straight. You see it here. Important to get on the power early. Top speed here about 250 kilometers an hour. Now coming into the Vidal chicane. Again, taking lots of curves. Second gear through this one, then back third and fourth. And again, back on the power. And that is one lap of the new Nürburgring with Manuel REUTER. So I'm joined in the commentary position by David Allison, and we check out first qualifying, David.
Matthias Ekström, one of the men to watch during the course of the qualifying session. He was the last one out on track for Superpole because he set the best time in the qualifying session. And Ekström trying very, very hard indeed. Way up on the curb coming out of the corner there. The target time for him set by Gary Paffett. But Matthias Ekström then with the Audi trying hard. He made no obvious mistakes, but he couldn't quite repeat that very impressive run in the qualifying session. Third in Superpole was as good as it was going to get for Ekström, the man really battling in the championship with Gary Paffett. And once again, this 7th round of DTM looking set to be a battle between Mercedes and Audi. Out of the last corner, Ekström across the line, and that was good enough for third quickest.
I mean, I was looking to have a front row position, and I did not feel any mistakes on my lap, and it was just that the lap time was not as quick as I would like to.
Mika HÄKKINEN, of course, already had a win in the DTM, his comeback season, the former McLaren world champion, and looking very impressive all through qualifying into the Superpole runoff of the top 10 qualifiers. And HÄKKINEN really on it here and looking for a front row position, maybe even the pole.
It was a great qualifying. You know, we struggled a tiny bit on Friday. Also this morning the performance wasn't exactly ideal. But looking at the data with the engineers and understanding a couple of tricks in the circuit, we were able to manage to get the time in a correct frame. But even then, you know, the last sector for me is not the best possible. So there is still some studies need to be done before tomorrow.
HÄKKINEN then impressive for second on the grid, but Andrew Gary Paffett even more impressive for pole.
Well, indeed, yes, he set the pole last year, won the race, looking for a repeat performance today. And here comes Paffett, about to cross the line. And Paffett takes it.
A third pole position of the 2005 DTM season to Brit Gary Paffett.
Yeah, it was a great lap. I mean, I did pretty much the same time in qualifying, and in qualifying I felt it was nearly on the limit, you know. The temperature in the track was better in Superpole, so the car was a bit quicker. I made a small mistake coming onto the back straight, so I lost a little bit of time there, but otherwise it was a good lap. The car's feeling really good, and it was fairly easy to drive. Maybe in qualifying it wasn't as fast as the Audis, but we showed in Superpole that we can do the same times lap and lap again. So
Yes, and they're enjoying that Super Pole success by Gary Paffett. And look at Mika. Shaking hands all round. But let's just go behind the scenes with a man who's been having a fabulous season. Well, you can truly call him Mr. Le Mans these days. Tom Kristensen, some 7 victories in the great round-the-clock race.
The first time I
crossed the finish line was an incredible feeling. There was so much professional work in it, on the car and with the whole Jost team. Driving for 24 hours with other drivers, it really is a different experience. Working with those drivers, I love to do that. But perhaps the best feeling of all was when I achieved my 7th victory this year, driving, of course, for Audi. That was a very special feeling. Tom Kristensen first proved he was a winner in Germany in 1991. He won the Formula 3 Championship that year. Then he went off to Japan for a few years. Then came back, drove in Germany in the Super Touring Cup in 1999 and finished 3rd in that year. He drove for Honda then. There he is, waving to the crowd. Since 2004, of course, he's been driving for Audi in the DTM, but been driving sports cars for them for many years before that. Tom's now at 38, and he says he gets a lot of his energy from his family. At the moment, he's living with his wife and children in Monaco, but he'd like to return to Denmark as soon as that's possible. My family is very important to me for my success in motor racing. You can relax at home, you don't have to think about the work, and that's what makes you strong. Being sure your family stands by you is very important. Motorsport is a very tough business, but the most important thing in life is your family, says Tom Kristensen. You have to be in pretty good physical shape to win Le Mans 7 times. Tom Kristensen does that by mountain biking and jet skiing. And of course, there's also a fun factor involved. The DTM's going pretty well for Tom this season, even though he has yet to stand on the top place of the podium this year. In Spa and Brno, he achieved 2nd places, but the first victory should have been in Oschersleben. He started from the pole and then he stalled the engine, of course. There he is doing it right there. But Tom's looking forward to trying to get a win before the end of the season. Tom Kristensen, the King of Le Mans. Well, David, a great guy, Tom Kristensen, as well.
Yes, he's become a real hero, hasn't he? Not just at Le Mans, but of course in the DTM, and he's one of the main drivers for Audi, taking on Opel and Mercedes in front of an enormous crowd here at the Nürburgring. 112,000 people crammed in, all very partisan for their favourite manufacturers, perhaps more so than drivers, really. The support comes for the car, not necessarily the man behind the wheel. But the drivers there on their parade lap, Alan McNish, dwarfed by one or two of the others on the vehicle there, waving to the crowd. The Audi drivers all sticking together. Manuel Reuter, you saw in the blue overalls. Well, it's a fairly cold day here. There's a bit of dampness in the air as well, but I'm sure we're in for a very dramatic race indeed. 43 laps around the shorter version of the Nürburgring. They have that little cut-through right-hand hairpin, but this is how they're going to line up with an all-Mercedes front row. Gary Paffett out-qualifying Mika HÄKKINEN.
On row 2, Matthias Ekstrom, currently 4 points behind Paffett in the championship, and Bernd Schneider.
And then behind them, a former champion, Laurent AIELLO, lining up 5th quickest, and 6th, Tom Kristensen.
Yeah, and AIELLO having won this race twice before. Martin Tomczyk and Alan McNish in Audi on the next row of the grid.
9th fastest in qualifying, Christian Abt, and 10th on the grid is going to be Heinz-Harald Frentzen. Those drivers taking their places via the Super Pole.
And the young British driver from Leicester, Jamie Green, just outside the Super Pole this time, 11th alongside Marcel Fasler.
Then Jean Alesi, a disappointing 13th. Frank Stippler, 14th on the grid.
Bruno Spengler of Canada and Emmanuel Reuter line up behind them.
with Dindo Capello a disappointing 17th and Stefan MÜCKE 18th quickest.
And on the back row of the grid, Pierre Caffer and Alexandros Margaritas, the German-Greek driver.
Well, the race underway after one lap behind the safety car. When it's wet like this, the regulations say that it's going to be a rolling start in effect, and so now we're racing for real, and it's Gary Paffett ahead of Mika Häkkinen, and then as they dive to turn one with Häkkinen trying to go around the outside, and there's another car there, Andrew, coming far too quickly into the hairpin. You can see how wet and slippery it is, and this is going to be really difficult.
Tom Christensen, I think, there, and he's dropped back to 7th place. Some parts of the track quite wet and others completely dry. So this is going to be very tricky indeed, and strategy is going to be important. Also problems at the start for Christian Abt.
So it's Paffett ahead of Häkkinen, and then in 3rd place looks like Ekstrom, 4th is Schneider, 5th is Laurent AIELLO, and 6th having a go at him as they head to the next of these very slippery hairpins. Looks like being the next to the Red Bull out is a Martin Tomczyk. That's the cut through that avoids the long drag downhill and back up again that the Grand Prix uses round here, for example. There's the top 8 with Christensen 7th ahead of Alain Muniz. Laurent AIELLO then the best of the Opel drivers at the moment, but it is Mercedes, Audi, Mercedes in the leading quartet.
You see, David, on that track, they just come into a wet a bit, but before then there was no spray at all.
Yes, this is a part of the world that has its own weather climate, really, doesn't it? Gary Paffett then leading, wipers on, everybody else sitting in the spray now, of course.
Bernd Schneider up in 4th place in the Mercedes with the yellow mirrors, and then Laurent AIELLO behind him. As we said, David, he won this race in 2001 and in 2003 when he was driving for Audi in the TT model.
And dare one say that AIELLO, amongst the rest of the Opel drivers, needs to start impressing, because Opel withdraw from DTM at the end of this year. He's going to be on the job market, and he needs to remind the other manufacturers just how good he is. Over a second is the advantage Gary Paffett has over Mika Häkkinen at the end of 2 laps, one of which was behind the safety car, one of which is under proper racing conditions. And now it looks as though Gary Paffett is getting away, and there looks side by side for 3rd. Ben Schneider having a go at Matthias Ekstrom.
Yeah, Schneider, 40 years old now, the old master of the DTM, won more of these races than anybody else, but hasn't really looked like winning one this year, David.
No, he's not. The young guns really have upstaged him, and Gary Paffett, who only came into the championship, 2 years ago, really helped in part by Uwe Altston withdrawing from the championship on the eve of the first race. There was a bit of shuffling that went on within Mercedes. A seat was vacant. Gary was drafted in, and boy, has he been mighty impressive ever since. That was in a year-old car. This is 2nd year in a proper current spec car, and he leads Mika Häkkinen. 3rd is Ekstrom, Schneider 4th, AIELLO 5th, Tomczyk 6th, Christensen 7th, and Alain Muniz is 8th at the moment.
Yes, this is Alan's 1st year in the DTM. Found it a little bit difficult to settle down to the cars compared with the Formula 1 machinery he's been used to recently, and of course racing the R8. But look at Paffett, mighty impressive, the youngster from just north of London.
And have a look at Ekstrom as well, because although he's got Schneider behind him attacking, that's sort of spurring on the Swede a little bit, and so now Matthias Ekstrom is closing on Mika Häkkinen. You've got the 2 Scandinavians then running together for 2nd and 3rd, with Häkkinen just ahead of Ekstrom, and then Ben Schneider right up behind them as well. 3 cars battling for 2nd, 3rd and 4th now.
Yes, indeed, we had a Scandinavian 1, 2, 3 in an earlier DTM race, but just look at Paffett here, and the gap 2.2 seconds now between Paffett and Häkkinen. As you said, good battle going on between Häkkinen and Ekstrom. Schneider still there as well.
And whilst they're all battling like that for 2nd, of course, that's playing into Gary Paffett's hands. He's getting away because Häkkinen is having to take slower lines in some parts in order to defend, and that is Manuel Reuter, whose rather unimpressive weekend ends in the gravel bed. Now, how he got there, let's find out, because there, look, there's an effort being made by one of the Mercedes up on the inside. Yep. Contact, and the Opel gets shoveled out of the way. The Vectra stuck in the gravel.
Well, that's very disappointing for Manuel Reuter, another veteran driver, former Le Mans winner. And there you see it again, and neatly turned around by Stefan MÜCKE.
Now Mika Häkkinen getting away once again from Matthias Ekstrom, and Laurent AIELLO there doing the best lap of the race. And in fact, look, the black Opel Vectra is now catching onto the back of Ben Schneider's Mercedes, and still Manuel Reuter in the gravel. It looks as though that is going to be the end of his race now, sad to say. But Gary Paffett driving, as we have said so often this year, very impressively indeed.
An announcement, David, this weekend that the rules will be more or less pegged for next year. some slight changes allowed. This is to keep costs down as that Opel gets pulled out of the gravel trap. 4 laps in, and HÄKKINEN's just taken a little bit of time off Gary Paffett at the front, and HÄKKINEN driving an outstanding race here.
What's quirky though is that we, although have the cars running very close to one another, we aren't yet having any shuffling really within that top 8, and although the road is greasy, nobody as yet has made, other than that clash between MÜCKE and REUTER, any serious mistakes. So the order remaining the same as it has done really since the race got underway. Mercedes management there watching on, they're going to be pretty pleased, I would have thought, about the progress of Gary Paffett. Meanwhile, over at Audi, Matthias Ekström is third and he's falling away from HÄKKINEN. So Matthias Ekström, last year's champion, of course, the young Swede, needs now to pull something out of the bag to try to catch up onto the back of that car. Mika HÄKKINEN in second in the Mercedes.
Yes, indeed, David. Last year, as we got to this stage of the season, it was very much Ekström versus Paffett for the title, and it's just the same here in 2005. And there is Gary Paffett then. There is Bernd Schneider. They're still trying to get that Opel back on the racetrack.
Well, they've dragged it out of the gravel, so there's a bit of optimism here. I'm just intrigued to see what the weather has in store for us next, because I would suggest it's starting to dry a little bit at the moment. You can see a slightly drier line in parts, and there is Ekström, who I don't think he's overly keen on this greasy condition, having a bit of a moment at the chicane, and that means now that he's got Schneider looking for a way past him. They could barely be closer. Ben Schneider tries the outside line there, going into the last corner. That's not really the place he wants to be. The car snakes, as you see REUTER rejoining in the background, and now Ekström versus Schneider, nose to tail across the line, all of which is letting HÄKKINEN get away.
Yeah, Schneider really attacking here. Let's see what he can do under the brakes. Not enough room. Looking down the outside, it's very wide there, but it's a longer way round.
And he's lost 2 or 3 lengths, hasn't he, to Ekström, because Schneider there, too much speed carried into the corner, runs wide, and that now means that Laurent AIELLO, look, is a little bit closer. So Schneider has dropped away from Ekström, but I reckon, given the pace of the Mercedes relative to the Audi, he should be able to make that back up again.
Yeah, I think we might be able to see that incident again. Here it is. Here's Schneider on the outside. There is Ekström, and you see Schneider going very wide, and that loses him momentum. He has to come off the throttle, and well, it's a brave move, but it didn't work.
Now, Laurent AIELLO looking very impressive at the moment in the Opel. There is Volker Strycek, the Opel Motorsport chief, watching his man in 5th place, closing now onto the back of Schneider.
And David, he's just been told that Marcel Fassler has got a drive-through penalty for overtaking under a yellow flag, so we should see him coming through into the pits any moment, and that'd be really the end of any chance Fassler had of getting into the points.
Bit of a shame for Fassler, really, this switch, this necessary switch, really, that he's had to go to Opel. He was a Mercedes driver, very impressive at Mercedes, but now driving a car that I'm afraid just is not as competitive as it needs to be, and Fassler's star that was shining very brightly last year is now waning a bit.
Steam coming off the circuit, temperatures rising. So unusual weather conditions here in the Eifel Mountains, but not that unusual for the Eifel Mountains, we have to say.
Now, what's going to be fascinating, of course, is what they do in terms of tyres at the first of the 2 mandatory pit stops. That could be crucial in second-guessing the conditions and working your way up the order. Do you go on to slicks, or is it going to get worse, and do you go on to wets?
And you can see people starting to take different lines to the normal lines to try and find the dry bit of the circuit. There, confirmation of that drive-through penalty that we'd heard about.
Yeah, Stefan MÜCKE, they're getting that one, and not surprisingly for his contact with Manuel REUTER, but for overtaking under the safety car before the race got underway proper. So Stefan MÜCKE, in the first few laps, having a fairly checkered time. There you can see the mechanics trying to keep the pit box area dry, sweep any water away. The last thing they need is for the cars to get wheel spin coming in or out of their pit stop. Mandatory 2 pit stops every car has to make, of course, in DTM.
And look at that dry line now. I think the rain has abated. And Mika HÄKKINEN still keeping Gary Paffett very honest indeed.
But look how he's managed to scalper as far as Ekström is concerned. Big gap now, 2nd to 3rd. In 5th place there is Laurent AIELLO, and then there's a big gap between him and Martin Tomczyk, who in turn is leaving McNish and Christensen. Battling for 7th and 8th. John Alesi is 9th. Heinz-Harald Frentzen is in 10th position. Just makes you wonder, though, whether 1 or 2 of the Audis may not be set up for dry conditions rather than the wet at the moment, because clearly they have very little by way of an answer to the leading Mercedes here.
David, I said they were looking for the dry bits of the track, but I think they're looking for the wet bits actually, because they started mainly on wet weather tyres and they're starting to get very hot now.
That's Fassler coming in for his drive-through penalty, not one of the 2 mandatory pit stops. There's another car coming in the background, Stefan MÜCKE, that will be for his drive-through. You can't count these as part of those 2 stops, so they're going to have to come in at least a further couple of times. The penalty stop then, drive through the pit lane and then rejoin. That will drop Fassler and MÜCKE a long way down the order. Well, Gary PAFFETT, very impressive already this weekend. Only 4th in qualifying, but quickest in Superpole, starting then at the front of the grid and leading Mika Häkkinen. 3rd is Matthias Ekström, who, in fairness to him, has done a very good job here on this ever-drying road of keeping at bay Ben Schneider. And Schneider, likewise, trying to attack Ekström, also doing a good job of keeping Laurent AIELLO, former British Touring Car champion as well, at bay.
Yeah, lap times, David, about 10 seconds off what they did in qualifying. And Gary's pole position about half a second faster than he did the previous year. So still progress with these cars.
Coming up then towards the end of the lap, and there the Audi mechanics squeegeing the water out of the way and also using blow dryers there to try and burn away the water, let it evaporate, get the pit box as dry as possible. You rather get the feeling, Andrew, at the moment that none of the manufacturers wants to blink first, if you like, and call one of their cars in. They're all waiting for another manufacturer to go first.
Yes, indeed. This is quite a battle here, isn't it, with this trio. And look at AIELLO. And Schneider gets his nose inside the Audi. But Ekström hanging on. This is very important for Ekström as far as his championship hopes are concerned, because right at the moment he will drop further behind Gary PAFFETT. That's the situation at the moment.
On board with Schneider, trying to make his move now to wriggle past Matthias Ekström, but he still can't do it.
They're all ducking and diving around, but the positions stay the same. But what about coming out of this corner? And look at Schneider, he's the meat in the sandwich there.
The 4 times DTM champion goes for it now, and Laurent AIELLO trying to piggyback him, isn't he, and try and follow the Mercedes through side by side. Schneider on the inside, Matthias Ekström just braving it out though, and Laurent AIELLO waiting to see a gap develop ahead of him. So Schneider really is in this invidious position, attacking and defending at the same time, Andrew.
Absolutely great battle between these 3, and good to see AIELLO right up there, because he's had a fabulous record, and 2 of them go into the pits for their stop. AIELLO continues. So Ekström it is, together with Bernd Schneider. Audi versus Mercedes out on the track. Audi versus Mercedes here, and these pit stops, which are lightningly quick.
And now it's all down to the mechanics, and they could change the order. Let's see, you're on board with Schneider. Stops, dead on his marks. Slick tyres look going on the Audi. Ekström's on his way, bit of wheel spin. Schneider's on his way. Who's going to get out first then? You're on board with Schneider, and I can't see Ekström ahead of him. I reckon Schneider's gained the place on the pit stops. He has. Ben Schneider goes ahead of Matthias Ekström. Fantastic work by the Mercedes crew there.
Well, as far as the time they were actually stopped, there was only 1/10 of a second difference, but I think it was the approach and the departure which made the difference there. So well done to the HWA team.
And Schneider, like Ekström, coming out on slick tyres. Matthias Ekström there fighting to keep hold of his position. Of course, slick tyres, new slick tyres on a still greasy road. But everybody now hoping that it's going to dry out sufficiently for those slicks to really come into their own in the next few laps' time. Schneider and Ekström, Andrew, here, they could barely be closer, could they?
Yeah, absolutely nose to tail. The 4 rings of the Audi right up the triple star of the Mercedes-Benz. And all these cars on the same Dunlop tyres. But just look at the Audi now. He seems to have got more grip. Maybe he's just got a bit more temperature, and he's going to drive all the way around the outside of Bernd Schneider, and he does it. Fantastic move. Super
bit of driving that by Matthias Ekström. It gains him a place. It puts him effectively back to where he was before the pit stops. In other words, ahead of Schneider. This is Mika Häkkinen coming in. First of 2 pit stops for the former Formula 1 world champion.
Yeah, had been briefly in the lead of the race, I should say. Up it goes on the jacks.
Martin Tomczyk coming in, John Lacey coming in, Jamie Green, Christian Abt all in as well. 4.6 seconds for Häkkinen. Super fast pit stop there.
Yeah, Tomczyk has a British engineer, Paul Thomas, who works alongside him. Problem for Christian Abt, his pit stop taking a long time.
And Martin Tomczyk there in danger of losing out because the Audi goes around the outside. Tom Kristensen just moving ahead of him. And Kristensen runs wide as well, scrabbling his way around the corner.
Yeah, I said Mika was briefly in the lead. That wasn't the case, of course. Gary Paffett yet to come in, David.
That's right, the slick tyres, of course, ready for Gary. You can see how much drier the road is now than at the start of the race. Matthias Ekström there, last year's champion, charging his way out of the right-hand hairpin. But that move he pulled on Schneider, and there is Schneider falling away and getting all sideways behind him. Impressive. Into the pits comes Paffett, I think, this time. Gary Paffett, the race leader, coming in, and that means now that Laurent AIELLO will take over the lead. Well, he's yet to stop, of course, but for at least a lap or so, the Opel driver can have a bit of glory. Gary Paffett into the pit lane.
A bit of glory, David, but I think they'll lose track time here because, you know, the track is drying out very quickly. You're better off to be on the slicks. Gary just locking up a little bit. See the wet tyres coming off, the slicks going on, the fuel's pumped in and out it goes.
And that, I think, is AIELLO electing to pit as well. He dropped so far back from Gary Paffett. Yes, so he doesn't inherit the lead. He comes into the pit lane instead. So Gary Paffett rejoining the race. Now, where does he slot in relative to Häkkinen? He's still ahead of him. There's Mika Häkkinen then. So it is still Gary ahead of Mika, just as he was before the pit stop. So that's Manuel Reuter going off again. This time it was definitely his own fault there, I'm afraid. A bit too much speed into the corner and not enough grip.
So Paffett leads from Häkkinen, Ekström, Schneider, Kristensen, AIELLO and McNish.
But Ekström, for my money now, is coming back at Häkkinen. He's certainly closer to him than before the pit stops. And the way that Ekström was able to go around the outside of Schneider makes me think that that car is far better suited to the dry conditions than it was the wet. And so now, with the road getting drier all the time, Ekström certainly the man to watch here.
Here's a replay then, David, of the two Audis, the three Audis all together.
That's Tom Kristensen going around the outside and Martin Tomczyk up into 6th place. That was pretty brave, wasn't it?
That was brave. Yeah, I think that was a very good call by the Audi pit to bring Ekström in relatively early, get him onto the slicks, get them up to temperature, and now he can really clock off the quick times.
Well, he's in again, in fact, because there is Ekström making his second stop. Another set of slick tyres ready and waiting for him. Car is refueled, the new rubber goes on, 4.6 seconds once again, a quick stop. Matthias Ekström now down the pit lane. Laurent AIELLO back in as well. That was a very brief middle stint to his race, wasn't it?
Yeah, this is obviously a strategy that they thought about, David. A relatively long first stint, quick middle stint, and then a longer third stint.
And there's a problem. There's a problem, look.
Oh, no.
11.4 seconds. The news from the pits is that there was a problem with one of the pneumatic air guns there to try and get the wheel nuts off. There was a problem with it. It jammed. They got it working again, but time lost, and that's a disaster for AIELLO. Well, he was fighting for 4th place. Now, way back in 11th after the pit stops.
Britain's Jamie Green down in 12th place. Disappointment for the Euro F3 champion. There's Margaritas in the orange car.
Yes, he's another ex-Euro Series F3 driver, had a FIA GT race last year in Dubai in the Conrad Run Saleen, and now switching to DTM, a year-old car, so inevitably, I'm afraid, it's always going to mask his ability to a degree. Gary Paffett then, the race leader. Mika Häkkinen second, and just look how much drier the circuit is now.
Kristensen into the pit. 7 times Le Mans winner. Stops on his mark, nice and dry in that pit now. New set of slicks goes on, and Tom's out in 4.5 seconds.
Tyrell Frentzen making his way down the pit lane as well with the Opel. And I think Marcel Fassler coming in as well behind him. So the second round of pit stops now being undertaken by everybody. Race order: Paffett, Häkkinen, Schneider, McNish, Tomczyk, Jean Alesi, the top 6 now. Heinz-Harald Frentzen is indeed in. Another of the many XF1 drivers that we have in DTM this year. And another good stop, as in behind him comes Fassler.
This track, of course, the venue for the European Grand Prix for the past 10 years. Quite a lot of building work going on, David, in the last couple of years as far as the pits and the control tower. I believe the control tower is almost brand new. Margaritas there, see him again, running down in 15th place. Here is Gary Paffett going down the pit lane, on the pit lane speed limiter. Gary, be very careful. You slip the clutch, you can cheat that limiter sometimes.
And we need to see where he's going to slot in relative to Ekstrom, who's the other driver in that leading bunch that's made a second stop. Gary Paffett stops. Ekstrom is on his way, coming then now toward the last corner. Gary Paffett's on the move, a 5-second stop, touch slower than Ekstrom. Matthias coming out of the last corner now, up across the start and finish line. And it looks as though Paffett is going to join ahead of him. Yes, he is, because Gary Paffett rejoins, and there is Matthias Ekstrom. So in real terms, Gary Paffett keeps his lead. He's the best placed now of the drivers that have stopped twice. You're on board with Ekstrom then. He will want to be on the tail of the silver Mercedes ahead of him of Gary Paffett. Mika Häkkinen, by the way, has yet to make his second mandatory stop in this race. That's another crucial pit stop to monitor, to see where he is going to slot in relative to Paffett and to Ekstrom, whose car, as I say, has just been getting better and better since it became a much drier Nürburgring circuit on which they're racing.
And plenty of new trophies into the Ekstrom home, David, recent weeks, because Matthias's partner, Tina Turner, the rally co-driver, just won the Rally of the Orient alongside the South African Janelle de Villiers driving for Volkswagen. So they can both polish each other's trophies.
Love is. So we have there a good little battle as into the pit lane comes Mika Häkkinen then down the pit road. So the double Formula 1 world champion pits. There's the arrow pointing him into his pit box. The team ready for him. The car stops on its marks. Up it goes on the jacks. The clock starts to tick. New slick tyres. The car dropped 5.3. Not as quick as Gary Paffett. Now where's he going to slot in? Can Mika Häkkinen hang on to the lead and get himself out ahead of Paffett? No, he can't, because there Gary goes through. Is he going to take second ahead of Matthias Ekstrom? No! Mika Häkkinen falls to third place then, of those that have stopped twice, behind Paffett and behind Ekstrom.
Yes, as you see from the graphic there, Schneider and McNish. One means they've only made one pit stop, and they will come very soon, I would suggest.
Well, Gary Paffett then, the real race leader. Here, by the way, is the replay from Matthias Ekstrom's point of view of the exit to the pits as he goes past Mika Häkkinen. And on the outside goes through to gain the place, heading down towards the first corner. And that gap between Paffett and Ekstrom, for my money, is coming down and down. Matthias Ekstrom now looking very, very rapid indeed. We'll keep an eye to the timing screens about this, but certainly now Ekstrom is taking the fight to Gary Paffett, the race leader. It's still the Mercedes there in the lead of the race in real terms. It's the best placed car of those that have made the two mandatory pit stops. So Paffett, Ekstrom, Häkkinen in real terms, first, second and third.
And David, we're hearing there may be a penalty for Gary Paffett. We didn't see it on the camera, but when he came out of the pits, apparently he crossed the white line. Now here is his pit stop. Paffett there stops right on his marks.
Yeah, he goes to the wrong box, doesn't he?
Went to the wrong pit.
Through another team, or another team within the Mercedes camp. When he can get away with that. Here's the white line situation, Andrew.
I don't remember doing it. I was quite surprised to see I was very surprised to see the drive-through penalty. I didn't know what it was for, so I don't remember doing it, and obviously it was a mistake that I didn't really realise what I was doing. So.
Well, there's no question of doubt about it. The camera doesn't lie in that situation. Mika Häkkinen having a straight on, decides to spin it round. Well, a bit of showboating after he's made the mistake. Just trying to pass Ekstrom.
You can't do that in Formula 1, can you? Welcome to the DTM, Mika. So, yes, he outbraked himself, I'm afraid, whilst trying to outbrake Matthias Ekstrom. Gets going again, but that wouldn't have done his tyres any good, and it wouldn't have done his position any good. Here he comes far too fast into the corner, round the outside of Ekstrom. You can see the tyre smoke there, and Häkkinen exits stage left.
So that takes the pressure off Ekstrom. There we see it again. He gets a great view. I should think he was chuckling in his crash helmet when he saw Mika going flying by. And we see it again, and they very nearly made contact.
I was thinking it was pretty close, yeah. Well, Häkkinen goes off, Ekstrom goes on, and Gary Paffett then ahead of Ekstrom on the track, but he's going to get this penalty, as you heard then, for crossing the white line. And clearly he was guilty, as Andrew Marriott said. The camera didn't lie. And Gary went across the white line, which is really to separate the pit exit from the racetrack itself. Well, the gap is coming down anyway, isn't it, between PAFFETT and Ekstrom, and it's going to go from bad to worse as far as Gary is concerned. As into the pit lane now comes Alan McNish, 7th, still not really having the success in DTM that he would have hoped for.
No, he's been close to the podium. He's had a couple of real disappointments. One, a pit lane speed limiter that wasn't quite working right, which cost him a podium finish. But Alan telling us that he really is enjoying the DTM. And it wouldn't surprise him if he didn't get a podium before the end of the year. So, now everyone's made their 2 pit stops. PAFFETT, Ekstrom, Christensen, HÄKKINEN, Schneider and Tomczyk is the top 6, but Gary, we know, has to come in. Norbert's on the phone, probably to the race officials.
Yes, exactly, because I don't think we've yet had confirmation about this penalty. There has been some discussion about it, but on the evidence that we saw a little while ago, there is no real defence you can put up for that, is there? Gary did cross the white line, and so he's going to have to take that drive-through penalty. What he has to do in the meantime is try to build up as big a lead over Matthias Ekstrom as he possibly can. He's not going to be able to maintain the lead, I'm afraid, by making that stop go, but it can at least minimise the damage and the number of places lost. But this really is bad news for Gary PAFFETT, and it's good news as far as Ekstrom is concerned, Andrew, not just for the race, but also for the championship.
There's the confirmation. Until then, it had been trial by television, but now the race officials have confirmed it. I've no doubt that Gary was already told. And, well, they certainly agree with it in the Mercedes pit, I suppose. They won't be happy, but they must have seen what happened on the television.
Well, in fairness to Gary PAFFETT, it's one of the rare mistakes we've seen him make in DTM. He really has adapted very well to the touring car class. Former single-seater star, of course, German F3 champion and Class B winner in the British Formula 3 Championship in the year 2000.
Could be so costly, this error, though, Dave, because it's so finely poised between him and Matthias Ekstrom at the front of the table, because the interest now is to see how many places he leads when he makes this drive-through. We are late in the race, there are quite big gaps between the cars, but this is going to cost Gary dear.
Well, we're on lap 30, and I suspect he will be in this time. 4.3 seconds is the gap, and you can probably get the feeling here that he's been told over the radio to push as much as he can on this in-lap, to try to, as I said earlier on, minimise the damage. He's going to lose places inevitably by coming in. In he comes then, so the message gets through, and Gary PAFFETT is called into the pit lane. He's had his 2 mandatory stops. Now, though, this penalty, I'm afraid, having to be taken.
So there he is, crawling down the pit lane on the limiter.
Matthias Ekstrom goes through, Andrew, to take over the lead. Mika HÄKKINEN is going to go through up into 2nd place. And where is Gary PAFFETT going to slot in? Let's see, because he's about to rejoin the road any second. Gets back in now, and that, I think, is going to put him just ahead of Ben Schneider. Yes, it is. There is Schneider.
Well, I think they'll be on the radio to Schneider telling him not to overtake. I think this far into the season, they've definitely got team orders. And every point will count.
Now, somebody else that's worth keeping an eye to in all of this is Tom Kristensen, who has been plugging away as the afternoon has gone on, helped in part by Mika HÄKKINEN making his mistake. But Tom Kristensen now up in that leading 3 cars. That means that we now have PAFFETT 4th, behind him Ben Schneider 5th. But Tom Kristensen, again, if Matthias Ekstrom's out his pace, anything to go by, could gain yet more ground before the end of the race here.
Yeah, absolutely agree with that. Now the track completely dry, David.
Yep.
There is Gary PAFFETT. He's got to keep his cool now, be absolutely furious. And wasn't sure why he'd actually been brought in.
Just to clarify as well, I think I said that Tom Kristensen was third. He's actually second, ahead of Mika Häkkinen, of course, after Mika's moment we saw at the first corner. You can see the rest of the order there coming through at the top of the screen. Wet tyres coming out in the pit lane. We've got reports that it is raining around the circuit, not blanketing the whole track, but at 1 or 2 corners, rain is falling again, and indeed the road does look a little bit greasy. So what do, Andrew? Do they brave it out and tiptoe round, or do they lose time, come in and hope that it gets really wet, and those wet tyres become the answer?
Well, they've got to brave it out at the moment, unless the rain really comes down. We're getting close to the end of this race now. There's the older Audi, you can tell by the smaller grille. But Ekstrom from Christensen back to Häkkinen, and then PAFFETT. 1.4 seconds between Häkkinen and PAFFETT. And PAFFETT, the fastest man on the track at the moment. And McNish up in the point scoring position again. On board with Gary PAFFETT in the Daimler Chrysler bank back to AMG Mercedes.
Now, when do team orders come into this, Andrew? Because Gary PAFFETT is Mercedes' main hope in the championship. He is behind, for example, another Mercedes driver, Mika Häkkinen, who is no real threat in the championship whatsoever. Mika, good for the headlines, but he's not going to win the championship, I'm afraid, for Mercedes. Now, what's going to happen? Is there going to be a call from Herr HAUG to say, Mika, pull over, let Gary PAFFETT through? What do you think?
Well, I think that's the only professional thing that HAUG can do now. This championship is very important, and that's the way of motor racing. It might not seem very sporting, but that's what happens. And if you're paid a lot of money, like Norbert HAUG is, to deliver a championship to your board of directors, you have to take unpalatable decisions like that.
So Mika Häkkinen then certainly being caught by Gary PAFFETT, and as Andrew says, the logical thing is to swap those cars around. How they do it remains to be seen. How obvious they make it, if indeed that is the tactic they employ. But Gary PAFFETT needs as many points out of this race as he can get.
Yeah, but Gary hasn't got anybody right behind him, so they can easily swap positions here.
Tom Kristensen in second place, Häkkinen third, PAFFETT fourth. Down they come towards the hairpin. Yeah, swapping isn't the problem in terms of getting one car ahead of the other. It's the fact that team orders are frowned upon by the officials. They need to make it look as though it's not team orders, don't they?
Well, frowned upon by Max Mosley in particular in a Formula One context. I'm not so sure that they bother too much in this championship. I mean, the man that heads up this organisation also heads up the Mercedes organisation as well, Hans-Werner Albrecht, and while he tries to build Chinese walls between himself, ultimately he calls the shot. So, heading towards the final couple of laps now. You see the brollies are up, David, and again, very tricky conditions in this race.
Fun and games going on here. This is the Stippler, Reuter, Spengler battle for 17th position. Frank Stippler just ahead in the Audi, ahead of the Opel and the Mercedes. This is what DTM should be about. 3 quick drivers and 3 different manufacturers all arguing nose to tail. Look at this.
Yes, with these rules being pegged for next year, David, the junior guys in the older cars shouldn't be at such a disadvantage. Indeed, on occasion this year, we've seen last year's Audi going very quickly. Here is Gary PAFFETT then, and there is Mika Häkkinen just in his sights, just the odd flick of the windscreen wiper.
See how gloomy it's getting overhead, some dark, ominous clouds, and the gap between Häkkinen and PAFFETT coming down and down. Last time Gary was a couple of tenths quicker. So he's inching up onto the back of his Mercedes teammate Matthias Ekstrom ahead of Tom Kristensen.
An interesting shot with the huge big screen behind, mirroring what we already had on the screen. Or replicating it, not actually mirroring it. Häkkinen versus PAFFETT then. Or are they just working together? We're going to find out in the next minute or so.
Well, the change is going to have to come pretty soon because we're on the penultimate lap. There's Norbert HAUG, the Mercedes boss, certainly having a good old think about this. If they are going to get team orders involved, they've done it relatively subtly, as in Mika Häkkinen hasn't slowed right down, pulled out of the way, letting Gary go through. Gary's had to work to get up onto the back of the black Mercedes and Mika Häkkinen, but they're about to start the last lap. Andrew Häkkinen, they're getting a bit of a slide on coming into the last corner.
Yes, indeed. Let's see what happens here. And I think Gary's got a better drive down there. We talk, of course, a lot about Norbert HAUG, the boss of Mercedes-Benz Motorsport, but in this circumstance also team manager Hans-Jürgen Matthias gets involved in all this. And just look at PAFFETT, very late on the brakes. Now he's right behind Mika HÄKKINEN. And we're just wondering if Mika HÄKKINEN's radio wasn't working. No, he goes a little bit wide there. And done with grace and elegance. But Gary PAFFETT moves up the order.
So we do have Gary PAFFETT up into third place. That helps his championship hopes. Now, if things stay as they are, I think he's going to be about 1 point behind Ekstrom, that's all. So damage limitation here, and this is how the switch was done. Mika HÄKKINEN just drifting a little bit wide, leaving the door wide open for Gary PAFFETT, who goes through to grab third place.
And we see it again from another angle. But having said all that, an outstanding race driven by Matthias Ekstrom as he heads now around the back of the pits, the long right-hander, which will then bring him onto the start-finish line. The checkered flag falls. Another victory for Matthias Ekstrom of Sweden. Tom Christensen of Denmark is second, and Gary PAFFETT gets third place.
And that, of course, with the mandatory 2 pit stops plus the drive-through penalty for crossing that white line. Very frustrating for Gary PAFFETT. He, of course, led the race for so long, but ultimately finishing in only third place.
The car was so fast, you know, that's why I was so far in front to start with. If you know, if you're that quick and that far in front, you don't come out that far behind. But it's even more disappointing when the car is, and myself was, you know, that quicker than everybody in the wet, quicker than everybody in the dry. When you finish third, it's really disappointing. So it's hard, you know. It's when you're fighting for the championship, when you do things like that, it makes it a lot more hard work. So
yeah, Gary obviously very disappointed there. There is your top 10: Ekstrom, Christensen, PAFFETT, HÄKKINEN, Schneider, McNish, Lazy, didn't see much of him, Green, AIELLO and Abt. And there the rest of the positions. But now we can hear from a delighted Tom Christensen.
I'm pleased. I mean, 2 pole positions in a row and not really a lot of points. So it went really well from 6th position today. The first laps were crucial in the wet, staying on the track. And I was fighting very hard and to know when we should stop. I think 1 lap could have been better earlier, but for the second place, everything went well. The second stop was absolutely perfect when I was when I closed in on Bernd Schneider. And then I profited from the Ekström and HÄKKINEN when they were fighting, and then second place is of course really good, and I hope it's a good omen for the rest of the year.
Well, this is how the championship now looks. Ekstrom just a point ahead of PAFFETT. Tom Christensen's third ahead of Mika HÄKKINEN, and it's going to be a real fight to the finish.
It was a great race. I mean, it was very tough in the beginning. I had a big fight with Bernd when it was wet. He was a little bit quicker, and then in the pit stop he could overtake us. But luckily, when we put the slicks on, I could overtake him again on the outlap from the pits, and from then on I just pushed as much as I could to try and keep the distance to Mika and Gary, and thanks to a good strategy for our second pit stop, we managed to come out in front of Mika, and at that time my tires were not new and his were, so I know that it would be a very, very tough fight, and luckily it ended already the first lap in the first corner that he spun, and I got some free air and could drive my own speed.
So here they are on the podium. The bubbly will get sprayed, and Ekstrom absolutely overjoyed. Let's hear now from Laurent AIELLO.
To start with, we didn't get the right information from the start. It was a rolling start or a normal start, and so this was the first difficulty. And then I think the other difficulty was to know exactly what kind of setup to start with, because we can go with a mixed setup or the dry setup. So this was difficult to judge and to choose. And then I had I think in the second pit stop, we had a problem with one of our gun. It was finished, you know, it was kaput. And so afterwards, you know, I was on the pace, but I was too far away, and I had no possibilities to catch up.
So disappointment for Laurent AIELLO, but now we can hear from Mercedes boss Norbert.
Gary had the victory in the pocket. He was clearly leading, dominant, no problems in the pit stops, quickest man under every condition. Has 10 kilos more handicap weight than the Audis, and still he was leading, which was impressive. I was very pleased with that speed. Then he did a small mistake. It is a small mistake to cross the yellow line. Does not give you any benefit, but the rules say if you cross a white line, you get penalized. So he got to drive through, throw the victory away, presented it to his opposition, and that's not what you should do. But Gary is a strong guy. He's 1 point behind his rival now in the point standings. 4 races to go, everything is open. Our speed is there. We won 5 out of 7 races, and we like to continue like that without crossing the white line, of course.
Audi heads the Constructors' Championship now, much to the delight of Wolfgang ULLRICH.
At the beginning on rain tires, we did not completely be able to go the speed that Gary did. But we didn't fall so much back. At the first pit stop, Matthias had an excellent pit stop itself, but then was just standing on his place and spinning the wheels. It was so slippery. He didn't move at all, so he lost a little bit of time there. But then with the slicks, I think the speed was there where we had been in qualifying. That means a strong team effort. Okay, at the end, Gary made his big error, which helped us to come in front. But after that, our cars could go the pace and stay with more or less the same distance difference to the end. I think it was an excellent race for us.
Hello, my name is Alan McNish, and so goodbye from the Nürburgring, and I shall see you in Zandvoort.